Good evening. For the third time, millions of people across the United States have taken to the streets in nationwide No Kings protests against President Donald Trump. These demonstrations are growing in size, and the criticism directed at the US president is becoming increasingly diverse. From Boston, the voice of Rahsaan cracks after just a few minutes having chanted so many slogans to the crowd. No thrones, no crowns, no kings, Hall shouts after each speaker, and the massive crowd gathered on Boston Common, the nation's oldest park, repeats his words. The rally begins with calls to welcome the resistance and stay active, stay woke. Hall himself wears a black t-shirt with the red inscription, Resist. Hall announced from the podium that 162 protests were organized across the entire state of Massachusetts. Only in California, a state over 400,000 square kilometers larger with 30 million more inhabitants, were more protests planned in a single state. This marks the third instance of people across the US demonstrating under the No Kings banner. These events are directed against the president's policies, with many accusing him of behaving more like a monarch than an elected representative of the people. And the numbers are indeed growing. This past Saturday, 180,000 people gathered in downtown Boston, according to organizers. The previous protest last October drew 100,000. Nationwide, there were approximately 3,300 rallies this time across all 50 states. The number of demonstrators grew from 5 million at the first protest to 7 million at the second, and now to 8 million. Official figures for these numbers were not immediately available. The protests are growing larger and louder. However, whether they will evolve into a mass movement that poses a significant political threat to President Trump remains uncertain. In Boston, a stronghold of the Democratic Party, the protest is vibrant, loud, and inventive. Yet the specific motivations of the participants vary. What unites them is the individual they hold responsible for their grievances, President Donald Trump. Carter Chamberlain is perhaps the most striking demonstrator. Even with tens of thousands already assembled in the park, he is visible from kilometers away. Chamberlain, dressed in a trench coat and a wool hat with silver-painted fingernails, has strapped a multi-meter-tall pole to his back, adorned with countless inverted US flags, a symbol of distress. When the wind blows through the sunny Boston Common, with temperatures just above freezing, Chamberlain must lean forward to avoid toppling over. I am here to give people hope and joy, he explains of his construction. People repeatedly stop, astonished, to take photos and praise his apparatus. Chamberlain criticizes President Trump for claiming too much power, also faulting Congress for failing to adequately check the president. He also highlights the situation in Burlington, a town half an hour north of Boston, which has become a symbol for the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, agency. ICE operates an office there responsible for 6 states in the Northeast, actively searching for and deporting migrants. Marcelo Gomes Da Silva shared his personal experience with ICE. The student who came to the US from Brazil at age 6 was detained for 6 days last year in Burlington. ICE agents stopped and took him while he was on his way to volleyball practice. Now Da Silva criticizes the administration from the podium. What kind of future are we creating if fear is stronger than education? The student asks. He believes America cannot be made great again by the government instilling fear in its people, a clear reference to President Trump's slogan, Make America Great Again. However, the criticism of President Trump in Boston extends far beyond ICE. Some accuse him and his associates of a cover-up regarding the investigation files on Jeffrey Epstein. Others criticize his failed economic policies, racism, transphobia, or corruption. And since last month, the conflict in Iran has also been added to the list of grievances. The protest is expressed not only through numerous speeches and colorful signs, but also through diverse and imaginative displays. To commemorate the bombing of a girls' school in Iran, the lawn features countless children's shoes, backpacks, and stuffed animals, each representing a victim. A sculpture carved from frozen water bearing the words "End ICE" also stands on the grounds. Another man has crafted a giant papier-mâché head of President Trump, complete with a crown. When a camera approaches, he briefly stops and raises his right hand in a salute. Unlike in Germany, this is not illegal in the US. Keith Daly disagrees with several aspects of the day, not just President Trump. This is not a social event, he states. He had just learned that a band, the Dropkick Murphys, a punk band known beyond Boston for their outspoken opposition to the president, was performing at the rally. For Daly, this is inappropriate. He argues that this is not about entertainment or good cheer, but about serious matters. The future of democracy in the US elected representatives, he believes, must make policy for their people, but that is currently not the case. Then the system will collapse, Daly warns. As he speaks, Daly is repeatedly asked by other participants if they can take a photo with him. Daly wears a uniform in the style of US soldiers during the Revolutionary War. He shoulders a long pole from which hangs an early American flag, with fewer stars arranged in a circle representing the original states. He had long considered what symbol all demonstrators could agree upon. Then I had the idea, I myself can be this sign. With his uniform, Daly aims to evoke the time when US history began, thereby illustrating that President Trump is endangering the nation's foundations. But he reiterates that he is not there for fun. I don't smile in the photos. This is not a cheerful event. Daly is not the only one drawing historical parallels this day. Many speakers also reference the history of the park and the city, which is widely considered one of the nation's liberal strongholds. In the 1960s, protests against the Vietnam War took place in the park. Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. also spoke here. He and his wife Coretta are the only kings accepted here. Moderator Hall jokes in one of his addresses, Senator Elizabeth Warren calls Boston the birthplace of the American Revolution. Daly worries about the future of the US. He fears that in a few years, such demonstrations might no longer be possible if things continue as they are. The blueprint for that already exists, he says, citing Hungary under Viktor OrbA, Russia under Vladimir Putin, and Germany under Adolf Hitler. Asked what gives him hope, Daly pauses to think. He admits it is difficult to find something at the moment. He then adds that he hopes for fair elections this coming November. Until then, he says, people can only continue to take to the streets. That is the maximum we can do right now. Daly's sister Kim, who traveled with her brother, speaks of psychological warfare against President Trump. His ego, she believes, is so large that he can barely ignore the protests anymore. Over the weekend, a White House spokesperson commented on the protests. Abigail Jackson stated, "The only ones interested in these anti-Trump therapy sessions are the reporters who are paid to cover them." President Donald Trump himself made no public comment on the matter over the weekend. What's your take on No Kings protests? Swell across US against President Trump? Share your view in the comments. Do you think this will matter in the next news cycle? This video was generated using artificial intelligence.